Anxiety, by its very nature, thrives in the future. It feeds off our fears of what might go wrong, of things not going as planned, of losing control over the unpredictable. What I found deeply resonant in Buddhist philosophy was its invitation to return to the present. It wasn't just about thinking positively or distracting oneself, but about observing what is without judgment or resistance. This simple shift in awareness, of anchoring oneself in the now, began to loosen the knot of anxious thoughts that once seemed impossible to untie. It's remarkable how much clarity emerges when we stop wrestling with every fear and instead just observe it. One of the most comforting aspects of Buddhism is its acknowledgement of suffering. It does not shy away from it or dismiss it as weakness. The first noble truth plainly states that suffering exists, and for someone dealing with anxiety, this recognition itself is profoundly healing. I didn't have to pretend anymore. I didn't have to mask my fears with a brave face. I was allowed to acknowledge my pain, to sit with it, and in doing so, I found a strange sense of peace. It wasn't about eliminating anxiety overnight, but about transforming my relationship with it. Buddha taught that the root of suffering lies in attachment, our craving for pleasure, our aversion to pain, and our clinging to permanence in an impermanent world. As I reflected on this, I realized how much of my anxiety came from trying to hold on to things I could never control, the outcome of situations, the opinions of others, the passing of time. The more I grasped, the more anxious I became. But slowly, through meditation and mindfulness, I began to loosen my grip. I practiced letting go, not as a form of resignation, but as an act of trust in the flow of life. Meditation became a sanctuary. Initially, sitting in silence felt uncomfortable. My thoughts raced, my breath felt short, and my heart pounded with every fear I'd buried. But I stayed. I returned to my breath, again and again, until it became a refuge. I began to notice patterns in my thinking, repetitive narratives that fed my anxiety. With awareness came choice, the choice to not believe every thought, the choice to respond rather than react. Over time, meditation didn't just reduce my anxiety, it changed how I related to it. It became less of a monster and more of a messenger. There were days when my anxiety would flare up intensely. On those days, I leaned into the practice of loving-kindness meditation. I would silently repeat phrases like, "May I be safe. May I be happy. May I be free from suffering." At first, it felt awkward, even insincere. But with persistence, these words began to soften the harsh inner critic that often amplified my anxiety. I started offering these phrases to others too, loved ones, strangers, even people I had conflict with. It was astonishing how this simple practice dissolved feelings of isolation and connected me to a deeper compassion that included even myself. The Buddhist concept of non-self was another liberating insight. I had always identified with my anxiety, thinking of it as an inescapable part of who I was. But Buddhism teaches that there is no fixed self. We are a collection of ever-changing thoughts, emotions, and experiences. This understanding gave me room to breathe. I was not my anxiety. I was not doomed to feel this way forever. Emotions came and went like waves, and I learned to surf them rather than drown in them. There's immense freedom in realizing that we are not the sum total of our worst moments. Impermanence, one of the core pillars of Buddhism, taught me that nothing lasts forever. This includes pain, fear, and anxiety. There were days when I felt consumed by anxious energy, convinced it would never end, but always passed. Sometimes slowly, sometimes suddenly, but it always moved on. Reminding myself of this truth helped me ride the storms without panicking. It helped me face the waves with courage, knowing they would eventually recede. Each time they did, I grew stronger and more trusting of the process. Another teaching that resonated with me was the middle way, the idea of avoiding extremes and finding balance. In my quest to fix my anxiety, I had often swung between extremes, complete avoidance of triggers or obsessive control over my routine. The middle way encouraged a more balanced, compassionate approach. I didn't have to be perfect. I just had to show up, again and again, with presence and kindness. This teaching helped me let go of rigid expectations and embrace a gentler, more sustainable path. As I deepened my practice, I began to notice subtle shifts in my everyday life. I became more patient, less reactive. I started listening more, judging less. My relationships improved because I was no longer projecting my inner chaos onto others. I approached challenges with greater equanimity, trusting that I could handle whatever arose. These changes didn't happen overnight, but they were real and they were lasting. The teachings weren't just abstract philosophies. They were living truths that brought tangible peace into my life. One day, during a particularly anxious moment, I remembered the story of the Buddha touching the earth under the Bodhi tree, calling it as his witness. He did not run from Mara, the embodiment of fear and desire. He stayed. He met Mara with unwavering presence and compassion. That image stayed with me. Whenever anxiety visited, I imagined myself touching the earth, grounded, present, and brave. I did not need to banish the anxiety. I needed only to meet it fully, to witness it without fear. There were also setbacks. There were days when anxiety seemed to return with full force, undoing all my progress. But I learned to view these moments not as failures, but as opportunities to deepen my practice. Buddhism doesn't promise a life free from suffering. It promises a way to navigate it with wisdom and compassion. Each setback became a lesson, each challenge a doorway to deeper understanding. I learned to be patient with myself, to forgive my stumbles, and to keep walking the path. Over time, the practices became part of my daily rhythm. I would start my mornings with meditation, take mindful walks during lunch, and end the day with gratitude. These small rituals anchored me, providing stability amidst the uncertainties of life. The teachings were no longer something I turned to only in crisis. They became the foundation upon which I built my days. And with this foundation came a sense of inner security that no external achievement could ever provide. The journey through anxiety, guided by Buddhist wisdom, has been one of the most transformative experiences of my life. It has taught me to listen deeply, to breathe fully, and to live gently. I have discovered that peace is not the absence of fear, but the presence of understanding. It is the quiet confidence that arises when we meet ourselves with honesty and compassion. Buddhism did not erase my anxiety, but it gave me the tools to hold it with tenderness. It taught me that I am not broken, that I do not need fixing. I am a human being, learning to navigate this complex, beautiful, and sometimes painful existence. And in that learning, there is immense grace. If you're someone who struggles with anxiety, I hope these reflections offer some comfort. You are not alone. There is a path, and it is one of kindness, awareness, and deep acceptance. May you walk it with courage. May you find the peace that has always been within you.